Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Rowena Henry. Today, my group and I will discuss about the Keynesian School by John Maynard Keynes. My group, which is Group 47, consists of 5 members. As the group leader, I will begin the presentation with the introduction part. Macroeconomy covers a very broad aspect which involves a global scale. Macroeconomic is applied into various types of aspects such as financial aspects, wage or income aspect, employment aspect, and so on. Macroeconomic involves two types of economic theory, namely as Keynesian economy and classical economy. So, through this test, one of the theory that we choose is Keynesian economic. Therefore, the focus of the study is to know and explore more depth about the Keynesian economic, or can be known as Keynesian school. According to Jennifer Francis, Keynesian economy is the theory that economic drive through higher total spending of the individual, families, business, and government. Next, we will proceed to the second part, which is the historical background of the Keynesian school. Hi, I also present about the historical background of the Keynesian school. The Keynesian school of economic thought, also called as the Keynesian, involved a lot of government intervention in theory and enhancing the growth and economic stability of one country. According to the Kimberly and Medio, Keynesian economic is the one of the theory that give an action to the government to increase demand and boost the growth. This was due to when the aggregate domestic demand are increased, purchasing power and national output were also increased to meet the demand. Who is this? He is a British economist named John Maynard Keynes, who is a founder of Keynesian economic theory in 1930. John Maynard Keynes is a son of an economist named John Neville Keynes, who was a lecturer at King's College, Cambridge, while her mother is social reform, who was a first woman graduate from King's College. John Maynard Keynes entered the same college as his parent and followed the footsteps of his mother, who was called as a college student at King's College. At the college, Keynes became really interested in economics, so he decided to change from the math and classic study to the economic and political field of study. This was influenced by Alfred Marshall, who is an economist in the college. John Maynard Keynes is a highly influential individual and economist in the 21st century, where all his opinions and ideas are developed and capable of changing macroeconomic practice and world economic policy. The economic theory that he brought to revise the world economy is very unusual in that it involves government intervention to increase economic stability and the strength of the world of the economics. The theory may stimulate aggregate total of demand, create jobs, and increase economic growth of the country. The theory may also to overcome the financial problem faced by the country. One of the issues that relate to John Maynard Keynes is economic depression in the United States in 1930. After the onset of the Great Depression, many economists began to support the policy proposed and put forward by John Maynard Keynes. The most interesting part is that this policy is presented in advance of the publication of Keynes' The General Theory. There are some individuals who think that income will increase and consumption will also increase. Wages are a source of consumer purchasing power, where any wage cut are opposed because it will worsen the unemployment situations. Next, I will give the chance to my group members to present their opinion.
Hi, my name is Richillie Edward. My number matrix is BT12403. Now, I would like to continue our group discussion with another 4 major questions of Keynesian school. First, I will talk about what were the major tenets of the Keynesian school. First of all, major tenets are general overviews of the ideas of successive schools of economics. I have identified 5 features of Keynesian economics. First, macroeconomy emphasis. In this macroeconomy emphasis, it talk about John Maynard Keynes and his followers were interested in the relationship between consumption and production rather than just how much money is spent or saved by individual and business. Second, demand orientation. This talk about Keynesian economists emphasize the importance of demand as an immediate determinant of national income, production, and employment. Third, instability in the economy. According to Keynesians, the level of planned investment spending is erratic. Changes in investment plans result in larger changes in income and national production than initial changes in investment. Fourth, wage and price rigidity. Keynesians says wage tends to fall inflexibly due to institutional factors such as union contracts and minimum wage laws. And last but not least, active fiscal and monetary policy. Keynesian economists encourage that the authorities have to interfere actively through suitable economic guidelines to sell complete employment, rate stability, and financial growth. Second, I will talk about whom did the Keynesian school benefit or seek to benefit. Benefit means an advantage or profit gained from something. We can see that Keynesian economics got here partly as it addressed an urgent hassle of its day, which is despair and unemployment. Also, it supplies something for nearly anyone and nationalized what changed into already being executed out of necessity. I can see that Keynes have his contribution to all employer and farmer. For example, farmer admit and advocated that monetary policy and is easy and they talk about low interest rates. Also, they also talk about tax cut during 1960 and 1970 and officially 1918 Keynes oriented to the supply side. Next, I will talk about how was the Keynesian school valid, useful, or correct in its time. First of all, valid is specific legal effect met with appropriate legal authority and due process. In this question, I can see that Keynes applied economic theory to policy making. Keynes provided a description of both fluctuations and mitigation programs. Besides that, Keynes argued there are alternative means of reducing wages to achieve full employment. Keynes opposed to wages cuts because they will cause a labor problem. And last but not least, now Keynesian method became useful, which is establish a new set of analytical tools to view the economy. Last but not least, I would like to discuss about which tenet of the Keynesian school became lasting contribution. First of all, contribution means the action of sharing something with other, whether from the educational, economics, or social aspect. So, when we talk about became lasting contribution, of course, that is about Keynes' contribution. You can see on the slide, we talk about consumption function, marginal propensity to consumer, marginal saving propensity, fiscal that relate about tax and government, and monetary policy. It's all about Keynes' theory. So I can see that Keynes' theory is still relevant and still exert a significant influence on macroeconomic. To be honest, I already learned all this topic in macroeconomics, so I can see how relevant are that Keynesian contribution. So that's all from me. I would like to welcome the next presenter to continue our group presentation.
Hi, my name is Rafidah Binti Natsir and my matrix number is BB211100573 and I'm going to continue our presentation with one of the major figures in Keynesian school of thought. One of the major figures is Sir John Hicks, who was the neo-Keynesian economist. To begin with, Sir John Richard Hicks, or known as Sir John Hicks, was a British neo-Keynesian economist that was born on 8 April 1904 at Leamington Spa, Warwickshire, England. His most well-known contributions to economics was the ISLM model 1937, which outlined a Keynesian viewpoint on macroeconomics, and his articulation of consumer demand theory in microeconomics. After that, for his educational background, he studied at Clifton College from 1917 to 1920, and after that, he was awarded a mathematics scholarship to study at the University of Oxford's Balliol College, where he entered in 1923. Despite his early mathematics concentration, he went to the newly founded School of Philosophy, Politics and Economics in 1923. In the 1920s, Higgs became a lecturer for a short while at the London School of Economics due to insufficient economists at that period of time. Later, he started his career as a labor economist, where he did descriptive work on industrial relations, and slowly he moved to the analytical side. Higgs was also associated with the British Academy in 1942 and a foreign member of the Royal Swedish Academy in 1948, where among his other achievements, and finally, he was knighted in 1964. Moreover, he received honorary doctorates from numerous British universities, including Glasgow, Manchester, Leicester, East Anglia, and Warwick, as well as the Technical University of Lisbon. In 1971, Higgs was chosen as an honorary senator by University of Vienna, together with Kenneth J. Arrow. To prove that he was a great economist, Higgs was honored with the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1971 for his tremendous impacts to welfare theory and general economic equilibrium. Next, our friend Rowena will continue our presentation.
Hi, my name is Rowena Komun, and I'm going to present about why Sir John Richard Higgs is interesting to us. First and foremost, Sir John Richard Higgs is interesting to us because of his contribution in the field of economics. His contribution can be divided into four major contributions. The first major of contribution is he introduced the idea of elasticity of substitution between capital and labor. This is interesting because even though the concept is hard to explain in a few words, but he used it to dispute Marxist theory by arguing that labor-saving technical progress does not always reduce labor share of national income. It can be found in Higgs' first book called Theory of Wages. This book also became a standard textbook for decades on labor economics. Secondly, he also invented the ISLM model, which is a graphical depiction of the argument John Maynard Keynes gave in his General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money in 1936. This model formalized Keynesian macroeconomic theory to show about how an economy can be in equilibrium with less than full employment. This model depicts macroeconomic equilibrium as a product of the interaction of financial markets and real good markets. Higgs published this model in a journal article a year after Keynes' books was published. It can be said that most economists became familiar with Keynes' argument by seeing Higgs' graph. Thus, this is interesting thing about Sir John R. Higgs is his invention of the ISLM model. Next, he published his book Value and Capital in 1939. In this book, Higgs upgraded the microeconomic analysis of interactions between markets by formalizing a model of comparative statistics and introduced Walrasian general equilibrium theory to the English-speaking audience. Furthermore, in his book, he also showed that most of economists then understood and believed about value theory, which is the theory about why goods have value can be obtained without having to assume that utility can be measured. Hicks is well known for his Hicks comparison principle, which is also known as Hicks efficiency. This concept was used as a criterion to judge the cost and losses for the loser with the gain of the winners. Last but not least, what makes him interesting to us is his contributions covered an unusual broad range of economic problems, to an extent that must seem staggering to modern academics who are encouraged, indeed forced, to plot a much narrower furrow, as well as his work often involve highly technical material. And I will pass it to my friend for the next presentation.
Assalamualaikum and hi. My name is Rahimatull Qhamisya. I will present on the significance of strategic idea to economic thought. The first is related to Keynesian economic and fiscal policy. The multiplier effect developed by Keynesian student Richard Kahn is one of the key components of Keynesian cyclical counter-fiscal policy. According to Keynesian fiscal stimulus theory, government spending injection eventually lead to the additional business activity and more spending. The magnitude of the Keynesian multiplier is directly related to the marginal tendency to take. The concept is simple. Expenditure from a consumer becomes income from the business, which then spend on equipment, employee wages, energy, material, service purchase, taxes, and investor return. The employee income can then be spent and then cycle continue. In this theory, $1 spent in fiscal stimulus ultimately creates more than $1 in growth. This appeared to be a cup for government economists, which could provide justification for a politically popular spending project on a national scale. This theory has been the dominant paradigm in academic economics for decades. Finally, other economists such as Milton Friedman and Murray Roberts point out that the Keynesian model misrepresents the relationship between saving, investment, and economic growth. The second is related to Keynesian economic and monetary policy. Keynesian economic focuses on solution in terms of demand to periods of Keynesian. Government intervention in economic processes is an important part of Keynesian weapon to combat unemployment and low economic demand. The emphasis on direct government intervention in the economy often put Keynesian theories at odds with those who argue for limited government involvement in the market. Keynesian theories argue that economies do not stabilize themselves quickly and require active intervention that increase short-term demand in the economy. Wages and jobs, they argue, are slower to respond to market needs and require government intervention to stay on track. Without intervention, Keynesian theories believe this cycle is disrupted and market growth become more unstable and prone to excessive volatility. Keeping interest rate low is an attempt to stimulate the economic cycle by encouraging businesses and individuals to borrow more money. Then, they spend the money they borrow. This new spending stimulates the economy. The last one is higher level of employment. Among the many pros and cons of Keynesian economy, one of the most prominent benefits is the higher level of employment supported by the economic model. During a recession, job decline and unemployment rate increase as businesses reduce the size of their workforce. Job shortage then reduce consumer demand for products and services as families tighten their belts. Now, let's go for conclusion.
As a conclusion, the Keynesian school or Keynesian economy does provide many benefits or advantages to a society, country, or globally. These theories are applied to enhance the growth and economic stability of a country through various aspects. Economics John Maynard Keynes should be an example to everyone, especially to those who venture into economics in the 21st century. All communities must support all policies set by the state in an effort to restore and improve the national economy. That's all from us. Thank you.